Okay, continuing on here, part 5 with dealing with anti-citizen. This is where it's going to get fun. We're going to get into Da Vinci Code stuff, conspiracies, and all this. Let's keep moving on here with his historical reconstruction.
Competing versions of the Gospels with wild variations and all sorts of crucial details with nothing more than religious tradition to tell us which are officially scripture and which are just fallible human concoction. We therefore have
Oh, oh, the ignorance. I mean, other atheists say this stuff. The Muslims say this stuff. Was it just, why did just all we have are human traditions to decide why the early church accepted the 4 Gospels, the 4 canonical, and then they rejected these poor Gospel of Thomas and Gospel of Mary and Gospel of Judas? Have you studied why did they just maybe they voted, or they voted at the Council of Nicaea? That's one of the theories that we have. Although Nicaea doesn't actually deal with the canon at all. No, it doesn't. But that's one theory I've heard. Maybe they got a hat and they put all the names of the Gospels in there and drew them out. Or maybe Emperor Constantine set this all up and just wanted the 4 because they painted Jesus that he liked. That's another theory. No, that's not how it worked, anti-citizen. The reason why these were rejected and the 4 were accepted is because the 4 come from the apostolic age. These others are way later. The 4 are Jewish in orientation. These others are Gnostic. That's why. There was an event that occurred in the church in Rome in the middle of the 2nd century. A guy by there, before we get there, let's go back to 130. There was the Bar Kokhba rebellion, where the Jews again tried to rebel against the Roman Empire and failed. And the rebellion was crushed. Bar Kokhba was killed. And the Jews are basically seen as terrorists in the Roman Empire at this point. They're basically seen like Muslim terrorists, how we view Muslim terrorists. So the Jews are not popular at all. Okay? A guy by the name of Marcion comes into the church in the mid-2nd century, and he says, he's very Gnostic in his orientation. He thinks the God of the Old Testament is an evil God. The God of Jesus, the Father of Jesus, is a good God who is above the Father or the God of the Old Testament. Jesus, the Father of Jesus, is above the false God of a demiurge, or however he put it, evil God of the Old Testament. And he said, let's get rid of the whole Old Testament. Let's get rid of Matthew. He's too Jewish. Mark's too Jewish. John's too Jewish. He wanted to get rid of the Gospel of Luke, the first 2 chapters, because Jesus was said to be born. He didn't like that. He wanted a Jesus who was more spiritual in orientation. And he chopped up Luke as well. He cut it up. At that point, the early church, the vast majority of the major centers of the early church, we're talking Antioch, Ephesus in Asia Minor, that Asia Minor area, the churches in the Macedonian area in Greece, the churches in Italy, the churches in Gaul, the main centers in Carthage, down in Alexandria, and in the Levant area. All those churches accepted a basic canon that included the 4 Gospels, Acts, all of Paul's letters. 1 Peter was pretty much in there. 1 John, the Apocalypse of Peter. There was some other stuff that was put in there. The Shepherd of Hermes was questionable. The Apocalypse of Peter was questionable. Then some other books in the New Testament, but were questionable, like the book of Hebrews is questionable. We don't know who wrote it. The book of Revelation is kind of weird, so we're not sure. A lot of churches did accept it, but some didn't. But the basic core of the canon is set by the end of the 2nd century. So all we have are human traditions. Again, super skeptical view applied to the New Testament, that if applied to anything else, we'd have to throw it all out. Okay? So you have to understand why they accepted the 4 and they rejected these Gnostic Gospels. Jesus in these Gnostic Gospels is basically a philosopher who's telling you how to look from within. There's no crucifixion. There's no resurrection. There's no miracles. Jesus doesn't do anything. He just simply tells people uh, great philosophy and how to look within and find the divinity within you. That's why a lot of liberal scholars like those Gnostic Gospels, because that's what they believe. But they're not earlier. The earliest is the Gospel of Thomas, which maybe date to the early 2nd century. All the 4 Gospels are earlier than that. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, all earlier. Okay, so your Da Vinci Code theory that it's just this conspiracy political thing going on, it's just bunk. Stop saying it. It's a lie. Check your sources, man. Okay, let's keep moving on here.
No idea how much of the New Testament is a reliable transmission of factual events as opposed to natural historical corruption. Moving right along, our next rule in historical methods states that the more time that transpires before recording an event, then the less reliable the account becomes. This should be pretty obvious given that human memory is notorious for omitting, substituting, and even inventing major factual details. A situation that is well known to get even worse when social pressure is added to the mix. Hell, why do you think human beings even bother writing stuff down in the first place? Memories unavoidably change over time, which is why the sooner a narrative gets recorded, the more reliable it becomes, while the later a narrative gets recorded, the more natural corruption there will inevitably tend to be. So if the gospel writings are...
Okay, first off, again, like I said, this is kind of the essence of the telephone game, right? One guy telling another guy, and that's not how it worked, Anti-Citizen. Jesus talked to a whole community. Let's say a whole group of people who were watching a movie. Let's say that happened today. They were watching a movie, and they thought that movie, the information in that movie, determined their eternal destiny. And they could talk to each other after the movie. Do you think they would remember what that movie said better, and they could talk to each other and bounce off? I think he said this, no, and then 5 other people would correct it. Say like I said this to a bunch of Americans. You know, on December 7th, 2001, Muslim terrorists attacked San Francisco. What would happen? What would happen, Anti-Citizen? I'd be shouted down. Why? I got all the facts wrong. That's the same thing with these gospel traditions. If a gospel tradition came up that was not true to the original teaching of Jesus, that person would be shut up. They'd say, no, that's not what Jesus said. That's not what he said. Now, what I do believe is that they did change wordings, but the essence of what Jesus taught was the same. And if they had messed that up, that would be they would be shouted down. So anyway, your analogy here, again, is incorrect. And we're going to deal with the date, the timing of it on our next video.